Hey, welcome to Out and About with Next Pittsburgh. I am Boaz. I am backstage here at the Benedum. The current production here, Pittsburgh Opera is doing the Magic Flute. We're backstage. We're going to check out some of the sets, some of the props, some of the costumes. We've got John behind the camera. But first up, we've got Chris Cox over here, who is the head of everything, communications, PR. Is that right?
Technically, my title is Director of Marketing and Communications at Pittsburgh Opera.
Well, maybe did I give you an upgrade or a downgrade? I'm not sure.
That was a promotion, so thank you.
So I guess, the Magic Flute is this magical opera. There's incredible music and costumes and sets and cast. And so for those who've never seen the Magic Flute, I guess what's the 30-second Cliff Notes version?
The Magic Flute is an opera by Mozart from the late 1700s, and it is sort of a fairy tale fantasy kind of story where Prince Tamino needs to rescue a princess, Pamina, right? And they undergo some trials, almost like an initiation into a society to try to bring the world into light and wisdom.
Gosh, you did a great job. I feel like you've practiced that.
Thank you.
And behind us right now, we see some of the incredible props and sets, and it's like a technical feat. It's such a huge production. I watched it the other night, and there's more and more cast members keep appearing. At first, you're like, oh, there are a couple people, and you're like, oh my gosh, where did those 20 people come from? And then all these things are dropping down, and these crazy bicycles are going by, pulled by birds. What is going on? It seems like such a huge, just a feat.
That's one of the fun things about opera is just how sort of grand and elaborate certain productions like this one can be, right? You have dozens and dozens of people on stage, including the choristers. You've got 50, 70 orchestra members, live musicians playing in the pit, right? So you've got a full orchestra basically down there to provide musical accompaniment as opposed to just recorded soundtrack or something. You've got army of stagehands, stage management people, wig and makeup, folks and so forth, all coming together to put on this wonderful live experience for an audience for a couple hours, 4 times, and then poof, it vanishes. So see it while you can.
Yeah, it's a big workout. And behind us, you see this dragon in one of the first couple minutes, really.
This is obviously, as you can tell, a very fierce dragon, right? The dragon comes out early in the opera, and it is chasing our hero, our protagonist, Pamino. He is very frightened by this dragon. He tries to ward it off, but he passes out, and it's up to some other folks to sort of vanquish the dragon and rescue him from it.
And this production has sort of like a steampunk vibe.
It does, yeah. That's one of the fun things about operas is there's many, many different ways to produce and show any given opera, right? So the sets and props and costumes for one Magic Flute can look very, very different from a different production of the Magic Flute that's happening somewhere else in the country, over time. So opera aficionados, if they have an opera that they really like, they want to see as many different interpretations of it brought to life with as many productions as possible and as many different cast members singing the different roles. So there's a lot of fun and a lot of opportunity for it.
Yeah, and this past year and a half has obviously been a weird time for live performance. And so what is it like today putting on an opera in this, I guess, post or in the middle of a pandemic world?
Sure. So Pittsburgh Opera, we're actually very fortunate that we were one of the very few companies, if not the only opera company in the country last year during the height of the pandemic to actually have live indoor performances for live audiences at our headquarters in the Strip District, right? We could have about 50 people socially distanced and masked and so forth, for some operas. And they were wonderful. But we were really excited to get back here to the Benedum this past Saturday night for opening night. It was our first time in 2 years being back here. And, our cast, everybody, we feed off of the energy of the crowd, right? And the audience was so appreciative to be back here again. They recognized what they missed, for the 2 years that we were not in the Benedum. And it was a really joyful, sort of triumphant celebratory evening for us.
And we've got a cast member here, too, who I think is hiding in the wings somewhere.
We do. Yes, absolutely. We got Veronique for you. Yes. Come on over, Veronique.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And so, it must have been a weird time for you because I'm sure there were a lot fewer performances over a pandemic.
Yeah, things changed very quickly in our industry. We saw the whole thing shut down. And then, as I think Chris was saying, Pittsburgh Opera was one of the very first companies that started finding innovative new ways to put opera back on, which was for us at our opera headquarters, masked, which is a whole special thing to sing opera wearing a mask.
What is that like?
It's tough because we rely a lot on how singing feels. opera is unamplified, so we don't wear microphones. So we have to be quite loud to fill a house like this. And we can sort of feel that in our faces. And when you're wearing a mask, you feel quite muffled. So you have to do a little bit of rethinking how you project, and also how do you communicate. Like, this is a storytelling art form. If this much is covered, how are you telling the story in a way that people can understand?
And you're a resident artist here. So what does that mean?
So opera as an industry has these sort of apprenticeships where once you finish your studies in school, maybe you have a master's degree, you sign on with an opera company to stay with that particular company for 1, 2, or 3 years. And you sort of fill in all the roles that make sense for your voice type while getting additional training. So I work with 3 coaches here. Very regularly, we work on the repertoire for the shows, but also my own audition materials, stuff I want to learn. And I get to do smaller roles and larger understudies on the Benedum stage and in the second stages.
And so a lot of the other cast, they're coming in from out of town, but you live here in Pittsburgh.
I do, yes. I moved during the pandemic, so I'm finally meeting Pittsburgh now. But yes, I've been here for a little over a year.
Cool. And you can show us, I guess, to some of the areas where you keep the wigs and costumes.
Yeah, I think we should head to the wig room, the wig and makeup room. It's got a lot of very cool costume pieces in there.
Okay, sweet. And in this show, you play Papagana.
I do, yes.
And I noticed Papagana only shows up in the second half of the show.
It's true, yes. I make a very late entrance, so I have the pleasure of getting to hear the rest of the show beforehand.
Well, that was my question. Were you just chilling backstage?
My call time is actually after the show starts, believe it or not. So I sometimes come early because I like to hear it. But yeah, I'm not called until almost 45 minutes into the show, usually.
Man, and did you grow up, knowing about opera? As a little kid, did you just figure out oh, opera, this is a thing I want to do?
It's a good question. My mom is a singer. She was singing with the San Francisco Symphony Chorus when I was a young kid. So I grew up around music and I did a lot of musicals. But I think I was sort of pulled into opera very purposefully by my mom, who loves classical music. And she took me to a comedy, not unlike the Magic Flute, because I didn't know a lot about opera, and my impression was it's very sad, it's in Italian, probably someone dies at the end, it's really heavy. And so she took me to a comedy in French, which is my other language, a feminist comedy about a woman who grows up with the army. And I was like, oh, I guess I was wrong about opera. I'm going to go pursue that. So that's how it happened.
Oh, how cool. Okay, and can you talk us through what we're seeing over here? John is stuck behind some costumes.
John is doing the Lord's work going through there. So these are some of my costume and wig pieces. My character goes through a series of disguises. So she is hidden and disguised as an old woman until the very end of the opera, where she reveals her true self. So for the very first 2 entrances, I have this lovely beast on my face. It feels like doing commedia a bit, if you know about commedia and mask work. So opera is a sort of hybrid art form where we have a lot of different things going on. And for me, I've taken classes in mask and mime, and that's really helpful for this comedy because my face is covered and all I have is body language and silly voices. And then at the end, I transform into Papagana, and I get to be with my life partner, Papagano. You can tell by the names. And I have this beautiful green wig that I get to reveal from underneath my disguise.
Now, this wig must be serious because you didn't even touch it as you flourished it, so it must be pretty fragile.
They take very good care of them, and they steam them and put them in their exact place. So I certainly don't want to be the one to make them do it again. But yeah, it's handmade for me. They actually hand painted and dyed it, and I think they even used some markers, coloring onto it to make the exact ombre that they wanted for that wig.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And this opera, it's from the 1790s. And so watching it, there are many parts which feel misogynistic and sexist. And how do you deal with that?
That's a great question. And it's something that I think hopefully everyone in opera is thinking about very regularly. Because when you have an art form that's 400 years old, not all of it ages very well. And there's a reason that opera survives, right? There's something about it that touches us. But elements of it are no longer, I think, appropriate for the 21st century. They don't really make sense for an audience of today. So one of the things that I think is cool about the Magic Flute that I think you can tell particularly in English, which we have done this production in English, even though it was originally in German, is that when it was created, it was a very clear, like, good and evil. The Queen of the Night is bad, and Zoroastro is good, and the Temple of the Men is the Temple of Wisdom, blah, blah, blah. That's not really what we're interested in seeing right now. So what I think is cool about doing it in English is you can actually hear why the queen is upset. And you see it in the first scene. Tamino comes out, there's this big monster, which you saw earlier, the dragon, and the 3 women who work with the Queen of the Night slay the beast. And then Papagana waltzes on and takes credit for it. And so right off the bat, we've got this dynamic of, there are these 3 very powerful ladies who just slayed a beast. And this, like, bird catcher is like, yeah, I did that. And they punish him for it. They take away his ability to speak for a while. And then we find out that the Queen of the Night's anger is coming from the fact that she, when her husband passed away, was stripped of her power because she was a queen without a king. Now, I think a lot of women can relate to this idea of being underestimated without a man. And that's why she's so upset, is that her agency was taken away. And so I think when you see that, it's not a good versus evil. We see this woman who is reacting to her circumstances being changed just because she's a woman, and this man with this sort of like old guard view of how the world should be, and then a member of each generational like side of these ideals coming together and making a world that is neither of those things, that is a little bit more shared. And I think that if we can get people thinking about the opera in that way, like that these 2 people are coming together and making the world that we want to see rather than the world where these 2 like powerful figures come from, that's a great thing to take away from this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a long answer.
No, it seems important to be talking about.
I agree. I appreciate that you asked it because opera is old, right? And we have to be very thoughtful about the way that we present materials like this. But I think that there's a reason it's survived. And I think it has the capacity to touch people. And like all storytelling is about empathy, right? So as much as we can cultivate that and make people think, we're doing our jobs.
Yeah. And then we've got a couple more of your costume pieces over there.
Yes, yes. So I can show you a little bit of these.
We'll let John get around us.
Yes, we'll trade. So when I come on stage for the first time, we have this lovely garment here. This is my old lady cloak. And as you can see, it's got a lot of layers in it because I actually do a quick change on stage. So when I transform, we have all these multiple layers of fabric in here and it snaps. So I throw it off and it sort of spins out and reveals all of this, which has been hiding underneath, and the hood falls off and reveals my wig, and I take off the mask. So then I change into my corset and my birdcatcher costume because, like Papagano, we assume my profession is a birdcatcher, and I have my little bow and quiver, and it's all very cute.
Are you ever worried that when you take your mask off, you'll accidentally pull your wig off?
I am, yes. It's not pinned together, though. It's rigged very carefully. You can see we have this beautiful fabric here. This actually is placed on top of my head, and we use mustache tape on the edges so that it's very lightly taped to my face. So if I just take it off from the corners and pull it backward, it doesn't have to be attached to the wig and rip it off. So a little bit of that theater magic for you.
There you go. And speaking of modernizing opera, if you were to choose a Netflix series to turn into an opera, what would you choose?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I feel like The Queen's Gambit would be incredible because it's already got that costume game. Like, it's going to be gorgeous on the stage, but I love the idea of a female protagonist. I love the idea of an uphill battle. Like, I think that would serve opera very well.
Yeah, and coming up this season, you've got more. I mean, there's a bunch of opportunities to see you in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I do this show, and then I'll be in one of our second stage projects in January, The Rose Elf, which is a contemporary piece for a quartet of singing actors. And then I'll be in Carmen for my final show of the season.
Cool, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And now we do a bit of a lightning round. Okay, so I've got quick questions, and you can just give quick answers. All right. Your go-to karaoke song.
Oh my gosh, I hate karaoke. Being a singer, it feels like you have to be good at it, and I don't think that's what karaoke's about.
Okay, you can pass. That's fine. Okay, how many?
I will say, I do sometimes do Enya because I think it's funny to see someone go up there and sing Enya.
Okay, how many languages do you speak and or sing?
I speak 2 fluently, French and English. I've sung in like at least 9 or 10.
Wow. Your favorite neighborhood in Pittsburgh?
Bloomfield.
Is that where you live?
Yes.
What do you eat or drink before a performance?
I bring an apple for intermission, lots of hot tea. That's the sort of secret.
What is your favorite restaurant in Pittsburgh?
I love Apteka. I am not vegan, but it is so good. Vegan Polish food, people. Check it out.
I'm all for it too. Yeah. What's the weirdest place you've ever performed?
Oh. I've done a pop-up performance of a Bach cantata in a stairwell where people were walking through to go to lunch. And so we took up the entire stairwell and people were kind of like shuffling by on the side.
That's great. Okay, this is a tough one. Which Pittsburgh sports team would you most like to sing the Star-Spangled Banner for?
Oh boy, I'm going to take some heat for this. I'm a huge hockey fan, so I would say the Penguins, but I'm from the Bay Area. Go Sharks.
And if people still have a bunch of opportunities to see the Magic Flute coming up this weekend, or, I mean, there's a great season coming up ahead, so there's tons of opportunity to see opera in Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us, Veronique, and to Chris, who's hiding out there somewhere, and we'll see you next week on Out and About. Thanks for joining us.